The sound was small, almost delicate, just a zipper sliding shut. But that soft zip cut through the silence like a wrecking ball. Jenny stood at the edge of the bed, her suitcase trembling between her hands. The final piece of clothing had been folded. The toiletries were in place. Each item packed like a piece of her heart, wrinkled, worn, barely holding together. And then, that sound. The sound of finality. No yelling, no door slamming, no dramatic music. Just a zipper. And it was louder than any fight they'd ever had. Then the door creaked. Sumit walked in like his body had arrived before his mind caught up. His eyes locked on the suitcase. His mouth opened, but no words came. He didn't need to ask. The luggage, centered perfectly in the very room they built their life in, had already answered the question he wanted to avoid. Jenny didn't look at him right away. She was trying to hold herself up. Her fingers gripped the edge of the suitcase like it could stop her from falling apart. Sumit stood frozen, not 10 steps away, but oceans apart inside. His smile faded in layers. A tilt of the lips, a twitch in the eyes, a tremble in his chin. He blinked too fast, like he could blink the truth away. Then finally, in a voice the world couldn't hear but Jenny couldn't forget, he whispered, "What is this?" That was the moment everything collapsed. But stories like this don't start with endings. They start with hope. They start with two people who genuinely believed love would be enough, no matter the whispers, no matter the stares, no matter the years of waiting. So how did it come to this? A silent suitcase? A broken man? And a woman staring at the door like it held her freedom and her guilt in equal parts? To answer that, we need to go back. Exactly 72 hours before that zipper, before the sound that ripped through everything they had built. Before she decided to put herself first, for the first time in 10 years. What made Jenny choose peace over partnership, silence over survival, exit over endurance? We're about to find out, and it doesn't get gentler from here. The sun had barely touched the rooftops of Noida when Jenny opened her eyes that morning. But it wasn't the light that woke her. It was the weight. Not on her body, but in her chest. That familiar heaviness, swollen and invisible, like carrying sadness in her bones. Her body wasn't tired, but she felt like she couldn't move. She sat at the kitchen table, where she'd sat 1,000 times before. Same chair, same view, same attempt at belonging. And then Sumit gently placed a steaming cup of chai in front of her, not saying a word, just quietly offering a ritual meant to comfort. Normally she'd smile, sip, say thank you, even if her heart was full of secondhand shame or bruised by another passing comment from his mother. But today, her fingers barely touched the rim of the cup. The warmth made her flinch. The scent made her queasy. Something inside her shifted, quietly, but permanently. She didn't drink it. Sumit noticed, but said nothing. Maybe he knew. The moment sat in the air between them, thick and silent. The kind of silence you only get when two people love each other, but something deep in the middle has started to snap. Jenny's lip trembled, but she held it in. She wouldn't cry. Not yet. Not over chai. That tiny cup suddenly felt heavier than everything she'd lifted to stay here. Her head told her it was fine. Probably just a low moment. But her body knew better. This wasn't temporary sadness. This was erosion. The tension wasn't loud. There was no yelling. But it buzzed under their quiet. Because they both knew what day it was. Sumit's parents were coming later. Not for blessings, for battle. They always came with smiles, stretched too tight, like masks hiding their hatred. Always just a conversation. Always to clear the air. But that air had been polluted from the beginning. And Jenny was choking on it now. She couldn't pretend anymore. She knew the rehearsed lines his parents would spit. That she's too old. That this isn't love. That she ruined his future. That she doesn't belong. And the worst part? She'd started believing them. The rejection wasn't shocking anymore. It was normal. Expected. Routine. And that might have been the most soul-rotting part of all. When the chai tastes like defeat and silence feels safer than asking to be accepted, something bigger than heartbreak is coming. Jenny wasn't running away. She was slipping away. And no one noticed. Not yet. The chairs were arranged. The tea was made. The tension was unbearable before the door even opened. Jenny felt the tightening in her stomach the second Sumit muttered, "They're here." It wasn't anger, not even dread anymore. It was resignation. She knew this scene. She'd lived it on repeat. And this time, she wasn't preparing to defend herself. She was preparing to float above it, like a ghost at her own funeral. Sumit's parents walked in like they owned grief. His mother with her hands flailing, her voice already raised before she'd even sat down. His father more restrained, but the dagger in his words always found its mark. These weren't conversations. They were executions with polite tea service, and then the spark lit. His mother seethed. "She ruined your life. Look at you. What future do you have now? You threw your name in the garbage." Her voice cracked but didn't break. Because she'd done this before. They all had. The greatest hits of shame, disgust, and legacy were once again on blast. Sumit tried to speak. Bless him. He always tries. Some small attempt to soften the blow. But it never lands. His words are steam in a monsoon. Jenny used to jump in, used to make her case, used to beg them to see her as a human being, not just a burden with a passport and wrinkles. But this time, nothing. She didn't yell. She didn't weep. She didn't even flinch. Just stared ahead and watched the words dance in front of her like flies buzzing on a wound that would never close. The silence she sat in wasn't accidental. It was chosen. Sharp, measured, final. And in that room, her stillness said more than any begging ever had. Even Sumit noticed. His eyes darted toward her, concerned. Because the woman who always fought for him had stopped. The protector, the fighter, the hopeful one, had left the conversation, even if her body remained on the couch. And that silence? That terrified him. Because when someone stops reacting, it means they've already survived the worst version of you in their head. And now they're deciding what version of themselves they're willing to lose, to stay. She sat alone in the bedroom, the same one where she once danced barefoot in her wedding dress, laughing with tears of joy. That tiny ceremony, the henna, the vows whispered in broken Hindi and perfect emotion, it all lived in the corner of her mind, like a photo left too close to the sun. Faded, but still there. That day, she believed they'd finally made it. That love had won. But love doesn't always stand a chance against fatigue. And tonight, she was empty. The kind of empty that feels like your chest is echoing. The room was quiet, except for the hum of the fan and the low sounds of Sumit breathing in the other room, restless in sleep. He didn't know she was still awake. He didn't know she was sitting at the foot of the bed, staring at the closet like it was full of ancient memories waiting to be buried. The yellow salwar kameez she wore during their engagement. The scarves she picked carefully to show respect. Clothes crafted for a culture she gave her heart to. And yet, somehow, she'd always been the foreign element. Her fingers traced the edge of the door before she opened it. Inside, nothing had changed. But everything had. She reached for the suitcase. Solid, old, dependable. The same one that had arrived full of hope and was now expected to carry what's left of her. Her breathing wavered as she gently unzipped it. She moved like someone performing ritual, each item placed in slow surrender, her body trembling with every fold. There was pain, yes, but more than that, there was resignation, like grief with no funeral, like mourning a version of herself that fought too long for validation she'd never receive. Then she held the necklace. The one Sumit gave her when things felt strong. She cupped it in her hands like it could talk her out of what she was doing. Maybe she wanted it to say, "Stay." But it said nothing. Nothing ever does when the heart's too tired to listen. Without a word, she tucked it into a small silk pouch and laid it carefully in the corner of the suitcase. And as the bag slowly filled, silently swallowing the last decade of her emotional labor, she finally let the tears fall. They came without sound. No collapse, no screams, just her lip trembling in a quiet room while the fan spun endlessly above her. When the loudest heartbreak happens in silence, you don't hear a goodbye. You feel an absence growing inside you long before the door ever closes. When Sumit walked in that evening, the apartment didn't feel wrong right away. His usual keys on the counter routine, his soft Jenny, echoing into the hall. It all started like normal. But then, he walked into their room and stopped cold. The suitcase stood in the middle of the floor, zipped, waiting, like a quiet bomb. He didn't say anything for a second, not because he didn't understand, but because he did. His hands dropped to his sides. His eyes did something strange, like they tried to process everything all at once and then failed. His jaw tightened, then loosened like it couldn't hold words. For a second, he looked like a boy again. Lost, afraid, hoping it wasn't what it looked like. Jenny was sitting on the edge of the bed. Her posture didn't scream anger. It didn't scream anything. That's what made it terrifying. She was calm, too calm, and he knew her heart didn't do calm unless it was done. He pointed to the suitcase. "What is this?" he finally asked, but his voice cracked halfway through. His accent thick with raw confusion, denial already forming at the edges. Jenny exhaled, eyes bloodshot. No script, no clever phrasing, no band-aid lines to soften the blow. "I can't stay here anymore." She said it like it had taken 10 years to finish the sentence. Sumit blinked, like her words physically hit him. His body shifted forward instinctively, as though he could get closer to her and pull her back into the world where she stayed, fought, belonged, at least to him. "No," he whispered, walking faster now. "What are you saying? What does that mean? You're leaving?" Jenny looked up slowly, pain steeped so deep in her eyes it no longer looked fresh. More like an injury too far gone to treat. "I'm tired," she said, and her voice was softer than he remembered. Just tired of everything. He knelt in front of her then, desperate, grabbing her hands like they were life rafts in the middle of a storm. When someone stops trying to be understood, they aren't giving up on love. They're giving up on being hurt by the same love they once believed could survive anything. Sumit didn't let go. His grip tightened around Jenny's hands, voice trembling as he stammered the same two words over and over. "Don't go." He wasn't yelling, wasn't panicking the way people do when they have something to hide. This wasn't manipulation. This was the raw, unraveling panic of a man watching the one person who ever chose him about to walk away for good. And this time, it wasn't a threat. It was real. "I'll talk to them again." "I will. I can make them stop," he said too quickly, too softly, like if he added more promises to the pile, he could rebuild what was already lost. "We can move out, far away. Anywhere. I'll cut them off, Jenny. They don't have to be in our lives. I'll protect you. I swear." But Jenny had heard this before. Every round of promises came after the crash, not before it. And each time she'd latched on like it was oxygen, certain that this time the air wouldn't be toxic. That this time he meant it. That this time the change would last. Jenny looked at him, not with anger, not even with disappointment, just sadness, exhaustion pouring out of her eyes. deep and heavy like a storm cloud too tired to thunder anymore. "You're not lying," she said calmly. "I know you think you mean it. And maybe you do. But nothing ever changes." Sumit shook his head, shaking like a leaf now. He was crying, didn't care. The same man who used to worry what people would say if they saw them holding hands was now sobbing on the floor, clutching her like gravity depended on it. "It's my fault," he whispered. "I should have done more. I should have pushed back. I let them poison everything. I let them keep hurting you." Jenny's throat clenched. His guilt was genuine. She believed every word. But love alone stopped being the issue years ago. It was the weight of everything built around it that she couldn't hold anymore. "You've always needed me to survive your family," she said. "But I needed you to protect me from them. And that never happened. Not really." He started shaking his head again, eyes wild. "I'll protect you now. I'll fix it now. I believe you," she whispered. "But I can't wait anymore. I can't hurt in circles. I don't have anything left inside me to bargain with." He looked stunned, like her silence earlier hadn't prepared him for this version of clarity. Jenny, who cried, who pleaded, who tried to smile through shame, wasn't here anymore. What he got now was someone who had reached the bottom of her emotional wallet and couldn't even afford to hope. "Every time I sat at that table with your family and pretended their words didn't stab me, I gave up a piece of myself," she said, voice shaking now, but not breaking. "Every time I told myself their approval wasn't necessary, I chipped off a little more. I wanted to believe that love could survive anything. I really did. But love doesn't survive silence. And we've been silent through all the wrong parts." Sumit looked like he was cracking under every line. His chest heaved. He squeezed her hand harder, trying to hold on to both her and the version of their story that still had a happy ending. "Tell me what to do," he said. "Tell me what you want me to do. I want to feel safe," Jenny said instantly. "Not walking on eggshells safe. Not quiet for peace safe. I want to wake up without dreading who's coming over to remind me I'm not worthy of being in this house. I want dignity." And then she paused. She wasn't saying it to make him hurt. She was saying it because if she didn't, she might choke under the words she'd never let out. "I want to stop surviving. I want to live." She let go of his hand. Not with a pull, but with a soft slide. A gesture a person only makes when they're not letting go out of anger, but release. Sumit sat completely still. His face couldn't decide if it wanted to cry harder or go completely numb. His hands hung in the air for a second, lost without hers. "You said you'd always be with me," he said, more to the floor than to her. "You said this was home." Jenny nodded slowly. "I meant it. But I was also telling myself something I needed to believe. That I could make this work. That if I gave more, gave everything, I'd eventually be accepted here." She shook her head, eyes distant. "Now I realize. I never really belonged. Not to them. Maybe not even to this life we built." That last sentence was a stab neither of them could dodge. Sumit leaned forward, resting his forehead on her knees. The boy who once promised to fight the world for her, now begging the woman he built his entire reality around not to disconnect the last wire. "It doesn't work," Jenny said softly, running her fingers through his hair. "It hurts you too. You know that." He didn't deny it. He just stayed there, frozen. And she stroked his hair like it would make the pain land softer. When you've apologized for years for simply existing in someone else's story, choosing to write your own isn't rebellion. It's rescue. The lights were low, but not off. The silence between Jenny and Sumit had changed. It wasn't charged like before. It wasn't the silence of people biting their tongues or holding back tears. This was a stillness that comes when two people have said everything, and nothing at all. The couch felt colder, the air thicker. Somewhere in the corner, a clock ticked, but even time seemed hesitant to keep moving. Jenny sat curled up at one end, with her knees tucked tightly to her chest. A throw blanket she didn't remember pulling over herself. Sumit sat at the other end, hunched forward, elbows on knees, rubbing his hands together like he was trying to generate answers from friction. They hadn't spoken in over an hour. Not after she'd told him she was leaving. Not after she'd said she couldn't keep hurting to stay. But the silence wasn't cruel. It wasn't angry. It was full of shared ache. Full of everything unfixable. Two people sitting beside the ruins of something they built with full hearts and empty support. Sumit finally looked over at her. His voice, when he spoke, was barely a sound. Why now? Not why leave. He didn't need to ask that anymore. But why now? Why did today break what 10 years of wounds couldn't? Jenny didn't look at him right away. She let the question sit, then slowly turned her head and met his eyes. I woke up 3 mornings ago, and I realized I hadn't looked forward to a single day in weeks. She paused. And the worst part is, I wasn't even surprised by it. Sumit swallowed hard, looking down. I just don't know how to live like this anymore, she said. I tried so hard to believe we could carve out a space for ourselves, that with time, effort, love, everything would settle. But it's like building a house on sand. No matter how strong the love is, it keeps sinking. Her voice cracked a little at sinking. He nodded slowly, his throat moving like he was forcing back sobs. He didn't fight her words. Not because he agreed, but because they were true. And he knew it. I think a part of me kept staying, she said, because leaving felt selfish. Like I was giving up. Like I was taking something from you. Her tone dropped to almost a whisper, but staying has taken everything from me. They were both crying now. Not loud, just tears that wouldn't stop coming, like their eyes had become grief's quiet messengers. Jenny looked at Sumit and said the thing that hurt her the most. I used to think you were all I needed. And maybe at the beginning, you were. But now, I need peace. I need space to breathe, without being questioned, judged, looked down on. Sumit looked shattered, but he didn't try to talk over her. He let her finish. I know you love me, Sumit. I've always known. That's what makes this so awful. But loving someone doesn't guarantee you're safe with them. And I haven't felt safe in a long, long time. Sometimes love doesn't die. It just runs out of oxygen. And nobody notices until the silence is louder than the heartbeat. He wiped his face roughly and reached out. She took his hand. It was instinctive. Even with everything broken, it was still home. You know what hurts the most? He asked quietly. She tilted her head. I thought I'd lose you to America, to distance, or time zones, or your family pulling you back. I never thought I'd lose you to here. Jenny closed her eyes. She hadn't expected that. He was right. They both sat back against the couch, still holding hands. Not tight, just enough to remember what they were to each other before the world tried to unmake them. I wonder, she said, if we met at a different time, different place, if we'd have survived. In another universe, he replied. They both smiled faintly, the kind of smile people give when they've cried too much. And now? He asked. What happens to me when you're gone? She inhaled deeply. That question always felt cruel, even when it wasn't meant to be. You find a version of peace that doesn't come at the cost of someone else's suffering? I don't want that peace, he snapped. Not loudly, but urgently. I don't want a version of peace that doesn't have you in it. Her hand shook slightly in his. Then maybe the version of us that loved each other this much needs to forgive the parts of ourselves that can't make it work anymore. They didn't speak after that for a long time. He leaned into her lap like he didn't care how much it hurt, breathing her in, committing the weight of her to memory. And she gently stroked his hair, tears silently coating her cheeks. Her heart screamed, but it was muffled by the weight of too many years of being the outsider in her own life. They sat like that until the moon moved positions in the sky, until emotions had exhausted themselves into silence again. Eventually, they both laid on the couch, him behind her, curled around her like he used to when the world felt safe. But this time, it wasn't protection. It was goodbye in slow motion. The scariest part of a break isn't the fight. It's when all that's left is love, and even that's too bruised to hold the weight. The early morning light had a strange stillness to it, like even the sun knew something was about to break. Neither Jenny nor Sumit spoke much during the ride to the airport. The car felt like a coffin full of memories. Every bump in the road pulled them closer to a future neither of them wanted. Outside the window, the world churned. Inside that cab, time froze. Sumit reached over more than once, placing his hand over hers, silently begging the contact to change her mind. Each time she allowed it, but neither looked at the other. It was easier that way. When they finally arrived, the terminal was waking up. Families gathered with loud voices, airport staff moved with routine speed, and loudspeaker announcements echoed through the glass walls. But for Sumit and Jenny, all of it melted into static. Their moment had nothing to do with the surroundings. What was happening between them couldn't be seen by anyone else. It was too quiet, too specific, too cruel. Sumit insisted on carrying her suitcase, gripping the handle so hard his knuckles went pale. Jenny didn't argue. Letting him hold on was the last grace she could give him. One last task for the man whose love she never doubted, but whose protection came too late. They walked slowly through the terminal, every step heavier than the last. Jenny could feel his energy withering beside her. He wasn't walking, he was dragging himself. She stopped before the check-in line, turning towards him. This was the moment. "You still don't want me to go," she said softly. Her voice didn't need to be loud. Every word landed sharp. He didn't answer. He just stared at her, breathing jagged, eyes red. She continued, "This isn't what I wanted. Not really. I imagined a life here, a full one. With traditions, with laughter, being embraced by the people you love. But I've been asking for a seat at the table for a decade. And sometimes," she paused, "you realize the room was never meant to include you." He looked like his body might split open from the ache. "It doesn't mean I don't love you," she whispered. "It means I love me too. And I've been forgetting to choose me." He took a shaky breath, then reached over and held both her hands, still clinging to some invisible thread he hoped could pull her back. "You are everything," he whispered. "And I'm losing everything." Jenny met his eyes and said the words that had been living in her chest for weeks. "If I stay, I'll vanish. Little by little, every time I'm reminded I don't belong here, every time I shrink myself to fit into a place I was never invited to, I'll disappear. And I'm already halfway gone." Some goodbyes don't come with slammed doors. They come with soft voices in crowded rooms, and the slow release of hands that still want to hold on. Sumit opened his mouth to beg again, but something stopped him. Maybe it was her tone. Maybe it was the clarity in her eyes. Maybe it was the quiet in her body that said this decision wasn't made yesterday or last night, but years ago, slowly, one heartbreak at a time. He didn't argue when she took the boarding pass and tucked it into her purse. They walked together to the security line. Nothing dramatic happened. No one screamed. No tears fell to the floor. She stood in line like every other traveler, except she was leaving behind a life, a decade, and one man who had tried, and yet still couldn't save what mattered most. All around them, strangers pulled roller bags, wrestled with kids, joked toward boarding gates. Life was happening at full volume. But between Jenny and Sumit, it was heartbreak in silent motion. When it was her turn to move through security, she turned to him one last time. He reached up and cupped her face with both hands, desperate. Please, don't go, he whispered. Please. I don't know how to do this without you. Jenny blinked, holding back the wave threatening to destroy her resolve. Then she exhaled slowly and lowered his hands. I've lived too long in a story that didn't let me exist as myself, she said gently. Now, I need to write one where I can breathe. And with that, she stepped back. Security motioned her forward. She didn't look back immediately. The line moved. Her steps followed. But she felt him, standing there, watching everything they'd built scatter like sand through fingers. When she did glance back, she saw him folded over himself, tears running unchecked in public, grieving a woman who wasn't leaving him out of hate, but out of self-preservation. No one else in that packed terminal noticed what was being lost. No viral moment. No dramatic screams. Just quiet devastation wearing two human faces. She passed through the metal detector and out of sight. When the love of your life chooses peace over pain, it's never about turning their back on you. It's about finally turning toward themselves. When Sumit unlocked the door and stepped back into the apartment, the silence felt different. Not peaceful. Hollow. The kind of silence that follows something final. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but it wrapped around him fast. In one sense, nothing had changed. The lights were still off. The furniture still in place. The air still carried the soft smell of incense from the night before. But the energy in the room had drained out completely. Her sandals were still near the door. Her scarf still folded over the back of the chair. And on the kitchen table, the cup of chai he had made 3 mornings ago still sat there, untouched, cold, abandoned. He had begged her once to stay with him, saying, "This is your home." Now, he was standing in it, and it didn't feel like his either. He walked aimlessly across the floor, touching the back of the couch where they'd sat. His hand grazed the wall where her wedding garland had once hung. He stepped into the bedroom and looked at the bed, perfectly made, untouched since yesterday. She didn't sleep in it on her last night. She had slept on the couch. Quiet. Alone. Preparing herself to disappear without starting a fire, Sumit dropped onto the edge of the bed and pulled out his phone. The brightness of the screen was almost offensive in the dark. He opened the photo album instinctively and tapped a video, one from the wedding. Not for the 100th time, this might have been the 1,000th. They were both beaming, halos of flowers strung across them, hands tied together in ceremony. It had rained a little that day, and Jenny had laughed, saying, "It was lucky." Sumit remembered that laugh, the way she used to sparkle when she truly believed this was forever. Now he rewatched that same smile from a screen that couldn't hold her. He hit play again. Then again, and somewhere between the 3rd and 4th loop, he whispered her name. Not loudly. Not to summon her. Not to ask her to return. But like if he stopped saying it, she'd truly be gone. Jenny. Jenny. The name floated through the room like smoke. It filled the empty spaces, between the curtains, over the plates still in the sink, through the air that used to be full of her humming while she cooked. This wasn't abandonment. This wasn't betrayal. This wasn't a romance ruined by scandal or infidelity. It was something far sadder. It was 2 people who tried their absolute hardest and still lost. Because love, no matter how deep, can only live where it's allowed to breathe. Sumit stood and walked to the fridge, opening it out of habit. Her small jar of turmeric was still on the shelf. So was the leftover soup she made 2 nights ago, with quiet hands and a half-silent heart. He closed the fridge softly, went back to the living room, and sat down. Not to eat, not to rest, but to exist inside the echo of everything she had left behind without taking a single thing. Her presence lingered, not in a haunting way, but in the ache of routine. Her toothbrush still sat by the sink. Her favorite show still auto-played on the streaming app. Her phone charger still looped under the nightstand. He didn't touch anything. Didn't clean. didn't rearrange, because doing that would admit she wasn't coming back. He didn't cry hard. That had passed. What replaced it was far worse: stillness. A kind of emotional paralysis. Grief without answers. Love that ran out of air. He tucked his feet under himself on the couch and reached for the throw pillow she always hugged. Buried his face in it. Inhaled whatever trace of her scent might be left. Not to feel better, but to remember how it felt when she was still choosing them. Every part of this goodbye was surgical. She didn't storm out in rage. She didn't leave with bitterness. She made tea for him the night before. She folded her clothes with care. She cleaned the dishes instead of letting the sink pile up with guilt. That's what made it so hard. There was no mess. Just absence. Nothing dramatic. Just silence. And silence can be the cruelest goodbye of all. Some heartbreaks happen loud, with screaming and slammed doors. But some, the most lasting, happen in quiet departures laden with love. Because leaving someone lovingly is still leaving. And it still wrecks the person left behind. But Jenny wasn't the first to pack her heart into a suitcase and walk out. Not with hate, but with finality. And she wasn't the only one who had loved as hard as she could until all that love began hurting more than healing. Because in another quiet apartment, on another season, another woman said she just couldn't stay anymore. She also chose departure over destruction. And she, too, left someone behind, watching a door close. Not angry, but shattered. That story's one you haven't seen the full truth of yet. It wasn't all shown on camera. And of course, not everything made it into the edits. But when the camera stopped rolling, that couple broke in all the same ways. Are you ready to see how another unbreakable 90-day love story dissolved quietly, painfully, completely, just like this one? We'll go there next. And this time, the exit wasn't peaceful. It was slow burn chaos. Don't miss it.